Okay, so high-functioning autism versus Asperger syndrome. Here are three big differences I think you should definitely understand, know, and really get to terms with. All that's coming up. Hey guys, welcome back to the Aspie world. What is going on? My name is Dan. I have autism, ADHD, OCD, and dyslexia, and I make weekly videos all about this stuff. So if you're new around here and you want to learn more, just remember to hit that subscribe button down below to see more videos from me like this. And also, if you're watching on Facebook, be sure to hit that follow button because this is how you see my videos. All right, guys. High-functioning autism is a term and Asperger's is a term. Terms that we don't really use that much anymore, but there's a reason for that. And I'll explain the reason for that, and then I'm going to give you three differences between them, because there is differences, but they were never, when they stopped using the term Asperger syndrome and high-functioning autism, people didn't really explain what they were and why we stopped using them. We kind of just stopped using them all of a sudden. So, basically, high-functioning, classic autism, low-functioning, Asperger's, and all of the in-between nomenclature, which is naming or autism, these were put to rest in 2013, and they amalgamated everything into just autism spectrum disorder level 1, 2, and 3. So then where would we place high-functioning autism and Asperger's within this? It's very simple. Asperger syndrome would be classed as a level 1 autism, and high-functioning autism would be classed as a level 2 autism. And this is because people who were on the autism spectrum but were diagnosed with Asperger syndrome weren't able to access American healthcare institutionalized insurance company kind of protocol for saying, hey, I need therapy for autism, because their diagnosis didn't say autism, it said Asperger's. So they were like, oh. So the insurance company's like, oh, well, can't pay out, can't give you the therapy, you know what it is. And so they were like, oh, dang. So then they changed it. In 2013, they changed the way that the DSM, and then obviously the IDC, and then DISCO and ADOS, so they all changed the way that they diagnose it. These are all diagnostic manuals. And they changed all these. So it was just ASD, level 1, 2, or 3. So autism spectrum disorder, and whichever level, which I can understand. But also it made it super vague, which made it harder for somebody to understand the process, where you could, you might know somebody whose child is a 14, 15-year-old kid in diapers and they don't speak, and they're autistic, and they have global learning delay, which means they have some intellectual disabilities also. But then you have somebody like Elon Musk saying, hey, I'm autistic, and you say, well, how are these people the same? How do they expect the same level of attention? But they don't, because you have low support needs and high support needs, which is the old high functioning and low functioning autism. It's a bit confusing, but we're going to get through those two differences. So number one is that high functioning autism referred to the level 2 autistic individuals who they had civic skills, it's people who could function typically, but they have social skill issues, and they also have a delay. There will be some type of cognitive delay within their progression as they grow or as they kind of mature and develop into adulthood. Whereas people who are Asperger syndrome display the similar things of holding down typical civil tasks and being in society, yet there'd be no delay in their learning abilities. There'd just be a social impairment and some other kind of things like social, sensory processing disorder and looking people in the eyes, that kind of thing. So there was a difference, right? And it was to do with the way in which the cognitive delay displayed itself. If it was present, it was high functioning autism. If it wasn't, it was Asperger syndrome. But that wasn't the only difference, right? This is just number one. Number two is that people with Asperger syndrome have the ability to catch up and learn some social skills. They can intellectually see that socializing is a thing that they are good at, and so they can learn maybe a couple of bits and pieces that might make them feel a little bit more like they fit in, okay? So maybe they could go to an event and think, well, if I talk to people, then that's going to be only good for me, right? But whereas people who had high-functioning autism wouldn't even be able to go to the event and would definitely not even know that they are ostracizing themselves from socializing because they don't realize that they haven't got social skills, if that makes sense. And so that's why those had those two nomenclatures. And again, this is old school terminology. We don't kind of typically use that anymore. Even though I'm not policing the words, I'm just saying you don't typically use those anymore. But I sometimes still use the term Asperger's interchangeably because I think it's a good way for people to understand. Because you say, I've got autism spectrum disorder level 2. They're like, what? Or if I've got autism spectrum disorder level 1, they go, what? And so it's easier for them for a person to say, oh, I've got Asperger's syndrome. And they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Okay, so number 3 is that when people are diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, they always have an above level intelligence quota, or an intellectual ability that was above average, right? And this is now what sometimes they call it genius, sometimes they call it gifted, but it's basically just above average, right? But when people have the diagnosis of high functioning autism, they would have average to below average intelligence, right? And that was really interesting because that's how they still kind of look at where you are level 1, 2, or 3. There was a big whole hoo-ha within the community. People say, oh, you can't use some, you can't say stuff like that because it makes you sound like you're, supreme to the people who have just classic autism, high functioning autism, or autism level 1 is different to level 2 and 3. So if you've got a level 1 diagnosis and you're different to level 2 and 3, well, yeah, we're all different, right? That's what makes it so beautiful. But it doesn't mean that we're trying to say we're better than anybody. It just means that that's the diagnosis you have. It's kind of like if you are a better painter than somebody, then it's okay. That's just the fact of the matter, isn't it? If you have a high intellectual ability versus someone who just has an average intellectual ability, that's not supremism. That's just how you are. And so that's really interesting. There was a big old hoo-ha on it, but it's so funny. We don't really use those terms anymore. But with that, also you have like low functioning autism, which was then taken away because like it's almost derogative in a way because you're kind of making the person feel bad. Like, I'm low functioning. Like, what does that even mean? How does that even fit into it? But then if you think about it, there's another kind of diagnostic which is inside the realm of autism, but also outside of it, which is kind of like, it's called Savantism. And it's kind of like Rain Man. Dustin Hoffman plays Rain Man, right? And he studied him for the movie. He studied the guy called Kim Peek, who is a savant. Now, Kim Peek he had low intellectual ability, he had developmental delay, yet he was very gifted. He was extremely intellectual, and he was called the human Google at some point, Kim Peek. And he could read a book, both pages simultaneously, but with one eye on each page. That was so interesting, right? But he wasn't really autistic in the sense of like, you wouldn't put him into 1, 2, or 3. What happened was he had intellectual ability of a level 1 autistic, but had the global learning delay and the cognitive delay of a level 3 autistic. So that chucks them into a new realm where they call it savantism or savant syndrome. Again, fascinating. If you'd like to see a video on savant syndrome, just let me know in the comments. I read every single one, so I'd like to know that. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, share it if you think it's fun, and peace, guys. I'll see you in the next video.